We're talking about superannuation as well today because the Treasurer has announced that major changes could be on the way, which he says will reshape the $3.3 trillion industry and end the so-called super wars. There's no sign of those wars ending just yet. These changes that have been slated would make it harder for Australians to dip into their retirement funds early. But what other changes are slated? Joining me now, some reaction from the industry. Aware Super CEO Deanne Stewart. Thanks so much for your time, Deanne. We're reading through the tea leaves a bit here at the moment because nothing has really been announced or imposed from the Labor government. But where do you think it's heading?
Yes, today the government announced essentially their first go at a statement of the purpose for superannuation for consultation. And I think we and the industry broadly are very supportive of this. And it certainly gives the industry a really good sense of what the purpose of superannuation should be, which remarkably isn't there after 30 years since the superannuation guarantee was brought in.
It seems to be a cautious welcoming of this conversation, Deanne. Is there anything you're concerned about, any path that you think the government might go down which you think would be a bridge too far?
No, actually. In terms of the statement, I think it's a really good starting point, and we like it for three key reasons. The statement that they put out today talked about the purpose being to preserve savings. So that's number one, that it's about preservation for retirement. The second is for income in retirement, and we like that because ultimately the superannuation system is there to provide income in retirement. It's not for wealth preservation or estate planning. And then it also says to ensure that it's as equitable and sustainable into the future. And we really like those comments around it being equitable and sustainable and really make sure that the superannuation system works for all.
Is it sustainable at the moment? Is it equitable?
Certainly, if you look at a lot of the research into the Australian superannuation system, it says it's one of the world-class systems. But the one area of improvement is around being more equitable. So a lot of the tax concessions go to the wealthy. And if you look at that, therefore, that actually often disadvantages those on low incomes and for many women. Just to give you a sense, 72% of the tax concessions of the superannuation systems go to men and 28% to women. So that's an example where there's room for improvement, and that's where we really like the comments around it needing to be more equitable and sustainable.
Okay, so there's some talk around, if you have $5 million in superannuation, that should be a cap, or you shouldn't get the concessions that you do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're broadly supportive of that because ultimately, once again, if you go back to this draft statement of the purpose of superannuation and you want it to be sustainable, so you don't want there to be hefty tax concessions well beyond the purpose, which is around retirement income. And if you look at around 5 million and you say, okay, well, is that enough to provide a healthy income in retirement? The answer is soundly yes. And so beyond that, you end up providing tax concessions really for the wealthy into more what I'd call higher standards of living and estate planning. So I think the cap at around 5 million certainly makes sense. And once again, we'd like to see if that came in, once again, those concessions being then used to make it more equitable, which is more for those in low income and those that do not get as much from a tax concession perspective in superannuation.
Well, what are your thoughts about people being able to draw down on their super early, whether it's to buy a home? We all know how hard that is at the moment to get into the property market. Do you think that's a good idea?
So I think ultimately what we like about the statement of the purpose of superannuation is the preservation, i.e. the superannuation system is there for people's retirement. And I think it's too easy to consider it as a huge pool of money that can be used for anything rather than it's people's own money for their retirement. And that's why they get the tax concessions to balance up with the preservation. So for me, dipping into superannuation before people retire for all myriads of reasons, whatever the government of the day might want it to be, is a dangerous thing because ultimately that is not what the superannuation system or the tax concessions are there for. And as it relates to housing, I would certainly say it doesn't really even get to the heart of housing affordability. We have a housing affordability crisis, but actually being able to tap your super is not going to solve the housing affordability issue, and at the margin may actually increase the cost of housing.
Yeah, it might be inflationary, absolutely.
Exactly.
What is your read on what happened during COVID when we were able to access our superannuation? Up to 3 million people did, to the tune of about, what was it? It was several $billion, wasn't it? What was the
Over
effect
36
of that?
billion.
36 billion. I thought it was 36 billion. And
It's a big number.
In my head, I thought, no, surely it couldn't have been 36 billion, but it was that amount. What effect did that have from where you're sitting?
Yeah, certainly when you saw Australians tap into their super through that period of time, as I said, it was more than 36 billion. The answer is it probably helped a number of Australians. If you go back to that time through that pandemic and not knowing what was coming into the future, there was a significant number of Australians really facing financial hardship, out of jobs, and that certainly provided a buffer through that period of time. But certainly what we've seen since is a whole bunch of people, particularly young Australians, just literally tapped their super without understanding the ramifications for their future. So while you might dip in and get 20,000 today, that into your future may be worth more than 60,000, and that real dignity in retirement. So we certainly saw it used for some of the right reasons, but also a number using it for probably not helpful reasons as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Deanne Stewart, thanks so much for your time. Hope to talk to you again soon because this debate's just starting. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.